So Shudder just dropped the fourth film in the Hell House LLC franchise, and that is Hell House LLC Origins, the Carmichael Manor. And if you're new around here, I should probably tell you I'm a bit of a sucker for found footage movies. So when they announced a fourth movie, I was actually looking forward to it and just gave it a watch, got some thoughts, but figured why not do a ranking video of all four movies. But before we get into it, like always, welcome back to The Haunted Beard, everybody. My name is Jake. Thank you for joining me. It's all horror and thriller movie content on my channel, so listen, do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard. So kicking off things at number 4, my least favorite in the franchise is Hell House LLC 3, The Lake of Fire. And this is one that takes this character by the name of Russell Wynn, who is this media mogul, really rich guy. He's able to gain access to the hotel and do this interactive type theatrical performance experience called Insomnia, where people will pay to walk through the hotel, and it will be this play production of all these actors in the hotel, and they're putting on this performance of Faust. And so it's like this interactive type theater performance. Now, one of the aspects that I like about this movie, but this also applies to all the movies in this franchise, is that the presentation is obviously a found footage, but it also kind of is edited to look like a bit of a true crime documentary. So Morning Mysteries, which is more or less like the true crime type programming within the movie, they send an investigator out there to investigate and film and more or less put a story together on Russell Wynn and the entire experience and everything that's going on with his interactive theater. And Hell House 3 is really the only one of the four that I kind of am just sort of like meh about. It's not really all that good. It's okay. It's not absolutely god-awful or anything, but it's really the only one of the four that I was just kind of like, okay. There's not really much here to get all that excited about. Obviously, all four of these movies are what I think would be described as low-budget movies, but this is really the only one that feels cheap, if that makes sense. And I think the acting is noticeably worse in this, particularly the performance by the guy who plays Russell Wynn is just not very good. Just some of his dialogue and line delivery is just not very good at all. This one, too, is just the least scary. There's a couple decent sequences, but for the most part, the scares and the attempt at horror really falls flat. I think the entire climactic sequence is not very scary, not very effective whatsoever. And also, too, throughout the film, it does this like glitchy editing effect thing that just gets very repetitive and annoying. And there's also some really dumb stuff that happens that just kind of makes you roll your eyes. One of the crew members who is a part of this theater is taking pictures for her social media. And after the events of the film, so a part of the outside true crime documentary that they're making, they show these pictures, and they clearly have these ghostly-like figures in them, and we're supposed to believe that she somehow just didn't see them when she was posting them, and they're not really hidden all that well. It's very obvious that there are figures and people in these pictures who aren't supposed to be there, and so it's just like you have to be literally blind to miss them. So the fact that she had no clue that there were these ghosts in the pictures when she was posting them on Instagram is just ridiculous. And then the ending too is also a little bit confusing. I won't get into spoilers just in case you haven't seen it and you want to watch it, but something happens at the end that was definitely unexpected, but I didn't really understand how it worked. It was just kind of weird and confusing. And also, just the majority of the movie feels a little bit tired and repetitive at this point. And so, Hell House 3 is at number 4 for me. Next up at number 3 is going to be Hell House LLC 2, The Abaddon Hotel. And this one takes place 8 years after the events of the first film. And this time we get another investigative journalist going out there to try and uncover or discover some of the secrets and all the insanity that happened in the first film. And overall, I have a decent enough time with Hell House 2. I enjoy it enough. I think it's actually worth a watch. And it does a good enough job on expanding the story of the first film without feeling too tired or redundant like the third film does. So by this point, the Abaddon Hotel has developed quite a reputation in the town, and I like that they edit in some found footage of actual people going into the Abaddon Hotel and recording it on their cell phone and uploading it and stuff like that. And so you kind of get some different elements to it than just what's going on with the lead characters. So some of those sequences are kind of cool. There is a handful of, I think, pretty effective scare sequences in here. And this one, like I said, does a good job with expanding on the background and the history of the hotel that's all set up in the first one. It gets into the character of Andrew Tully and his history in the hotel and the cult and everything. And so it kind of adds some more creepy, mysterious elements to it. And overall, I just found this one to be scarier and more creepy and just more effective with the horror elements. Hell House 2 also mentions a character by the name of Patrick Carmichael, who is good to know for the fourth film. And it also gives us some more answers and context to some of the events in the first film as well. I also like the climactic sequence and think it is pretty good, pretty effective, and pretty disturbing and messed up overall. And so I have a pretty good time with the whole finale of it as well. And so that's why Hell House 2 sits at number 3, and I would say this one is definitely a tier above the previous entry. All right, next up, number 2, and I will say the top 2 are yet another tier above the previous entry. This one's actually pretty close, but for me, right now anyway, it's going to be the latest one, Hell House Origins, Carmichael Manor. And overall, I had a pretty good time with this one and quite enjoyed it. I think they do a good job with taking the story in a different direction and yet still having a connection back to the Abaddon Hotel. This time, it's in a completely different setting and location. They're at Carmichael Manor, which is this huge mansion in upstate New York that's in the middle of nowhere. And we get these 2 girls and 1 guy, they're girlfriends, and it's one of the girls' brothers goes out there, and they run, at least the 2 girls run their own sort of paranormal, true crime, investigative type program. And they go out to Carmichael Manor to figure out what in the world happened. As back in 1989, the mother and daughter of the Carmichael family were found murdered. The son was also believed to be murdered, and the father just completely vanished. This one, like the others, is edited in a true crime documentary type way. And I thought this one does a good job bringing in that investigative aspect into the story and kind of adding more of a layer of mystery. And I like that it didn't feel too repetitive or redundant. Again, I like that they took it in a different direction while also still connecting it back to the original and the Abaddon Hotel. And I just like how they brought those 2 worlds together in this, which really even kind of expands further in the Hell House LLC universe, if you will, to where I think you could even expand it more and make more films. This one has a handful of, I think, really effective and solid found footage sequences. They added in some film reels from 1989 with the original Carmichaels that they edit in there as well that I think works pretty well. And there's just some creepy moments, and a lot of it is just really simple but effective. And there's something for me about when things aren't where they are supposed to be and you uncover something that isn't supposed to be there, that's just creepy. Case in point, the clowns. These have got to be some of the most creepiest clowns in horror movies, at least for me anyways, and I think they're extremely underrated. This is obviously not one of the biggest, most popular and well-known horror movie franchises, but man, I think the clowns here are just really effective. And again, there's something about when they show up in places that they're not supposed to be. It's very simple, but man, it's always pretty creepy. There's another really solid sequence where one of the characters is on this video call on her laptop, and how things unfold there I found to be really effective. It does fall into some of the general tropes or complaints that people would have with a lot of found footage films, and so this isn't going to necessarily win any new converts, but I think if you're already a fan of the franchise, I definitely think there's quite a bit here to appreciate. I'll also give the film some credit. It has one jump scare in there that genuinely got me and I thought was pretty well done. Again, them freaking clowns, man, they get me. I can't help it. I don't have like a general fear of clowns either, but something about them in this movie, they creep me out. Anyways, they also do a pretty decent job with, whenever you have a haunted house movie, you just say, why don't you just leave the house? And they do a decent enough job with kind of explaining that about why they don't at first, and then they end up trying to, but can't really leave. And so I think they do a pretty good job with kind of dealing with that major excuse. And then you get the whole climactic sequence, which I thought was pretty well done. It's nothing revolutionary. There is some blood in this movie, but I would say overall a pretty minimal amount. And so it really kind of relies on the creep factor and the atmosphere. And I just found it to be pretty effective. And so had a pretty solid time with Hell House Origins. That is why it is my number 2. But for me, my number 1 is still the original Hell House LLC. Not by much though, but for today anyways, it's still my number 1. Again, I like the sort of true crime documentary mixed in with found footage aspect here. I like that it starts off actually with the sort of the climactic moment as the Hell House has opened up and you get to see right at the beginning of the movie this video footage recorded by just one of the random people who got tickets to go into the house. And so it's kind of cool that it almost starts at the end a little bit, but there's enough mystery there to where something awful and horrific happened, and there's just all sorts of insanity and chaos, and so you're left still with, well, what exactly happened? And so it's kind of one of those rare cases where a movie can kind of almost get away with kind of starting at the end and then rewinding without sort of ruining the end or ruining the suspense or the surprise. And so you're just left with all hell broke loose, what in the world just happened, and then you get into the movie. And so I kind of like that setup. I think it works pretty well. And so this one just involves a handful of characters who gain access and rights to the Abaddon Hotel to use it for a haunted house. And of course, it actually is haunted, to say the least. And the main reason for me why Hell House is my number 1 is I still think it is the scariest and the creepiest. I think it has still the best and most effective found footage sequences. I love the scene that's done like all in one take where the guy's walking through the house and he notices the clown at the top of the stairs to the basement, right? And then goes down to look in the basement, comes right back, and the clown is gone. And it's just kind of little things like that I just find effective. I really like the other sequence where the camera guy wakes up in the middle of the night and he's recording himself because he thinks he hears something, and then there's that girl behind him that he doesn't know, and then he sees her, and then he covers himself up with the blankets, and he's getting ready to pull the blankets down. That scene always just gets me. I'm like, oh man, it's just a really great scene. And so I just love that scene when he's under the blankets. It almost kind of brings back that fear of when you're a kid and you're afraid there's monsters under the bed and you don't want to pull the covers up to look under, right? Just a really great little scene that I think is just awesome. And the original to me just feels the most real and raw. And I think it feels the least edited in a way, like in terms of the actual found footage to it. It just has the most raw, real, authentic feel to it. And so I think overall that just makes it more effective, and I think it's why I find it the creepiest and the scariest of all 4 of them. And I also quite enjoy the ending of this one as well. It genuinely took me by surprise the first time I watched it, and it kind of adds a nice little twist and a pretty solid unexpected moment. And so yeah, I really like the ending. I think it's pretty solid. So still think that the original is pretty solid. I actually did a top 10 found footage films on my channel. It's been a little while ago now, but Hell House LLC is in there. And yeah, I'm quite a fan of the original. So that is my list. Hit me up down below. Would like to know your ranking. Let me know too what you thought of the new one, LLC Origins Carmichael Manor. Would love to hear your thoughts on that as well. So that's all I got for you. Thank you once again for joining me. I greatly do appreciate it, and I will see you next time on The Haunted Beard.